Hi, my name is Shelley Emma with the Big Life Project. My guest today is Cynthia Morris. Cynthia is a writer, creativity coach and mentor, a traveler, and an entrepreneur. I first met Cynthia about a year ago when she was planning how to launch and publish her book, Chasing Sylvia Beach. It just came out. And so today we're talking about the book and about the 17 drafts she went through to complete it and how that process and the major effort of the launch have helped Cynthia make her life bigger and juicier. Cynthia, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Shelley. This is a very exciting time for me, and I'm glad to be in conversation with you about it.
Yeah, it's fun to have talked with you before on the project and then to have you come back and sort of check in and tell us what's going on. Very cool. Alrighty, well, so to start off, why don't you tell us what your novel, Chasing Sylvia Beach, tell us what it's about.
Okay, well, I'll hold it up because that's always fun. Chasing Sylvia Beach is a novel set in Paris, 1937. It's a romantic fantasy. This is the kind of book for people who love being transported somewhere slightly dangerous and very exciting. So my character is a young bookseller in Denver who mysteriously finds herself transported back to the past and has to find herself in order to find her way home. Mm-hmm. It's very Paris, which is one of my favorite things to fantasize about.
Yeah, there's a lot of richness. I enjoyed seeing how much you loved the details of the history, from the costumes to the settings to the, what the bookstores felt like and what people had to do in order to just get through the daily life. Your love of the place and the period really came through.
Oh, great.
So as a writer, I know sometimes that what is apparent, for everybody who reads the book will get something a little different, and for the writer, it's different again, to have been so deeply steeped in the project for so long. What really resonates most for you from the story?
Well, the thing I think about when I think about talking about this is who influences us and how. My character, Lily Heller, finds herself completely entranced with this woman, Sylvia Beach, who was a bookseller in Paris. So this is where me and my experience mimics my characters. I found out about Sylvia Beach and I thought, what a cool person. I want to live in Paris and be surrounded by intelligent literary friends writing books. And so that is really at the core of it. And it was through the writing of the book that I discovered kind of the downside of having those role models. So the thing that I came away with and that I believe the book comes away with or gives readers is that notion that you can only follow those role models so far before you have to find your own path. And that's what my character discovers. That's what I have discovered. And it's kind of a double-edged sword. You're like, oh, I get to make my life. That's good. I want to be in charge. But then you really sometimes want an instruction manual. And I think if you're living a big life, you're kind of writing the instruction manual as you're going. If you even have a manual. So that was really important to me. But the thing that resonates most with my life in terms of, so there's the Sylvia Beach part, but also when I really wanted to work with books. I wanted to work at the library. I wanted to work at a bookstore when I was young in my early 20s. That's what I wanted to do. And so I finally got a job at a bookstore here in Denver, and the shop was owned by one woman but run by four 50-something cool, strong, interesting, powerful, opinionated women. So then I come in, this young, porous, give me everything, give me all the books, tell me what to read, tell me how to think. They really formed me in a lot of ways and gave me the courage to speak up and stand up, the courage to make my own way as a woman reading what I wanted, and they showed me how to have an opinion and be willing to state it. And I think that's one of the biggest gifts that anybody's ever given me, speak up. So
I can't imagine you without that, Cynthia.
Well, when you're young, you don't really know who you are, or you don't know what you're saying or what you really care about. And working at that bookstore and reading tons of books and engaging in conversation with them really, I consider it my graduate school, because that was just shortly after I graduated from college, and I did go to one miserable semester of graduate school, but the years I worked at a bookstore educated me so much more about people and books. And so in the book, then going back to the novel, this is a book about women and for women, women who are interesting, women who are doing something on their own, not related to a man. And so the women in the book, I think, are similar in some ways to the women in my life who showed me the way. And I wanted this book to have powerful women role models in it. So I think that's that resonates a lot with me, and that's a big thing that's important that I share with the world.
It's interesting to me to hear you say that, because in the book, the elder women who will end up, well, they have a lot of influence, they have a lot of initial control, and then they lose control. You know, they don't have nearly as much over Lily as of course the novel goes, and she doesn't know what they're doing behind the scenes. But it is a complex relationship, even though they're not face to face very often early on in the book. It's very interesting. It's an interesting take on mentoring.
Yeah, and I think about this: who influences you? A character in a book will influence you. An author of a book, or you'll see a photograph. Like, there are so many ways that we are having influence, and that we receive influence that we're not even aware of. So. That's just something that really came to my attention in the last year, to pay more attention to my influences, to be more conscious about that. It's like really taking the nutrients of what is around.
Yeah, and maybe intentionally placing the most nutritious and tasty where you can get the most from them. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. What is your purpose? I mean, writing a novel is a big deal. It's a lot of work. And even when it's just the first draft, you know, it feels like it's a big thing that you're doing this. What was your purpose when you sat down to write the novel? And how did that evolve? Because I know you went through 17 drafts of this thing. Oh my gosh. What kept you coming back?
I don't even think that counts the screenplays and the play of the drafts. That was just the drafts of it as a novel. But I started in 1999, and I had been writing since 94. So I was a young writer who had no idea what to write or what genre to write. So what I did is what I advise other people to do now, is just start. I try every genre. So I pretty much hit every genre. I wrote short stories, I wrote plays, screenplays, poems in all forms of poetry, articles, essays. I didn't do any technical writing or science writing, but I figured that was the way to find out what was what I wanted to write. And I thought, well, I love reading novels. I should try to write a novel. That's kind of like the coolest, best, biggest thing I could do, right? So I embarked on that, and then once I embarked on it, I refused to stop. Partially because I really, really wanted to get the story of Sylvia Beach out into the world. I think she's a remarkable woman with a remarkable story, and that there's a lot to appreciate and learn from her. So that got me going, and that did keep me going. But largely, the other things that kept me going were, I just wanted to know what was going to happen. There became a point where I couldn't let it go, because A, I wanted to know what would happen in the novel, and B, I wanted to know what would happen to me when the novel was done. As a character in my own story, I was not about to gyp myself from the glory or the whatever waiting on the other side of finishing. And I really want that for people too. Like, don't rob yourself of what's possible when you actually put something out into the world. And then the other big motivator, the other big thing that really kept me going, was being a writer's coach and putting myself out there as somebody who has something to say about the creative process. And if I hadn't gone through that and come out with my own book, I would feel a little bit less integrous. So that drove me, that motivated me.
It's and to get through something that is as big as and challenging and long-term as a novel, you have to have more than one reason. You know, I think you have to have lots of different wells to draw on to get you through it, because sometimes it's really fun, and sometimes, man,
It's not fun.
Yeah.
And if you're only drawing on your ego, you can't do it, because your ego really does take a trouncing. You hear that you've got to have thick skin, but it absolutely is true. And I'm going to talk about, you've got another question you're going to ask me. I'll talk more specifically about that. But yeah, I did not know I had it in me. Of course, I did not know it would take that long. Every draft seemed to take another year, and then there were years that I wasn't able to focus on it as much. So I don't believe it has to take that long, but things usually seem to take longer and take more than we expect. And I think that's the right place for optimism, because if you knew, like, imagine having children. I think it's got to be similar. If you knew how, many diapers you'd be changing, like how difficult it would be, you might not do it, but you get sucked in because of the excitement, and then you're willing to do it because you feel the payoffs along the way as well.
Well, and if you're looking at a project, you make that choice up front, at least a little bit, if it's not something that you're very committed to, at least a little bit thinking, can I actually finish it? I don't want to take on climbing Mount Everest. If I literally really can't do it, I might want to climb a different mountain that I actually could get to the top of. But the truth is, if you commit to climbing Mount Everest, you train for it and you get better at it. And by the end of the time, when you have climbed Mount Everest, you can climb Mount Everest. And you couldn't do that at the beginning. There are things you learn in any big project, and there's strength and capacity that you build in yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That you didn't know. Like you said, you didn't know you had it in you. Well, you probably didn't.
Yes.
But now you do.
Yes, I do, and that's huge. I feel that. I feel that very strongly, and each subsequent draft was much better than the one before, and I could see that, and I could realize that, and that gave me a lot of momentum when I had to face another draft, when I had to do another revision, and when I had to take people's, I hired editors and people to help me, to give me feedback, and so taking that feedback, knowing that it was going to make it better. And I really was very, very, very dedicated to making this book as good as it could be. And, what that meant kept changing as I learned how to write a novel. I did not know how to write a novel. I learned it over the course of all those drafts. So, it's good. I really believe it's a good book. It may not be a great book. It may not be a blockbuster book. That's not for me to decide, but I'm satisfied that it's a good book. And even now, a month after it came out, I can look at it and be excited about what I see. When it first came out, I would look in the pages and be like, oh gosh, you're still too close to the editing and the critical eye. And now I'm like, oh, that scene, I love that. Oh, that's a nice sentence. This is well done. Yeah. So it's interesting how with a little bit of distance, you can kind of soften and appreciate it more, and don't have the razor eye of the editor on it.
Well, it's a beautiful book, Cynthia. I love the cover. And I think that it will only continue to make more inroads, and people will continue to find out about it over time. I think people who love books and love Paris and love that adventurous finding out in life, where are you and where could you go, they're going to be drawn to this. And I think when book clubs start getting hold of this, it's going to be really fun to see what happens with that.
Oh, great. Thanks.
Yeah. So it has been a project of many years, and we've been talking about, how much work and effort and how much heart and soul has gone into this. I know from writing, it feels different at different stages. The drafting is so much fun, and the revisions can be very satisfying, but it feels different to do it. And, may I enjoy someday soon what it feels like to launch. But at every stage, you do have to keep coming back, and at every stage, you have to make it into something that is sustainable for you in that form, for who you are, where you are right then, to keep on moving it forward. So part of my question for you is, as the author, going through all this, how did it make your life bigger? How did it sustain you as you sustained it?
Well, it's interesting how you describe the kind of the stages of the creative process, because, or of writing a book, I do kind of see it in the stages. There's that, exuberant beginning where there's lots of possibility and it's fun, and so we could call that the free writing years. I used free writing as a way to get everything out with the story, and just to kind of put something down on paper. And then there starts to be the revision years, and that's when you're really digging into your craft. So rather than revision, like, let's look at what is craft. When I was studying what it takes to write a good book, the elements of story. So that was also pretty exciting too, because when you feel yourself learning and you feel those insights flashing, like, oh, now I can develop this character. Oh, this is what this character means. That's very engaging. And then that's also the years when I started submitting to agents and getting interest and then rejections. And I think I might have done that twice. So I submitted and I got interest, and then I said I need to revise. So I had more editorial feedback, and then submitted to agents again, and lots of interest. And one agent picked me up with the caveat that I revise it, and he had some suggestions about how to tighten the drama. And that was like a whole nother year before I was able to deliver a manuscript to him, and then he shopped it around and didn't have any luck. So then I was like, I've got to do one more revision. So that's the part where, those points where you're just wanting to kick and scream and whine and almost want to give up, and where you really have to get clear, like, can I do it? Am I committed to it? So that feels like those parts toward the end. So there's like the beginning, the fun of the new and the exuberant, and I can do this, and then the middle part of really maturing and learning the craft. I kind of think of it as a maturation process, and not in a mean way like you're immature, but definitely growing yourself. So in those last points, those last like 2 or 3 revisions, when I really had to you asked a question to me before, like, did you just have to suck it up? Was it really difficult? Was it a joy suck? I think you said. I'm like, yes, absolutely. Like, you want to cry, and like dark moments where you don't know that you can do it, and then you have to kind of repump your batteries and say, I think I can do it. I think I'm going to. It's worth trying. Mm-hmm. So, in terms of having a bigger life, it makes me feel like just a more mature person and a more mature creative person. That I finished this, that I drove it, that I drove the project and myself beyond what I thought I was capable of. I think that's where we get bigger. That's where we're like, okay, I'm willing and able to do this. And it's very humbling. It's very humbling. So like all of the, like, this is a good book and I love it and the cover's great. Like, that's just like that pure unbridled appreciation for, like, when you're a child and the kid comes home with this scribbled thing and it's like, look at this thing I made. And they're just like that pure joy of creation. You're like, that's so great. And you hang it up. It's kind of like that and I really am relishing that because along the way, there's a lot of dissatisfaction. It's not good enough. It's not right. It's not as good as I want it to be. I'm not done. And even when we complete something, like as I said earlier, like, oh, they were, looking at it, it was like, oh, I was still thinking with an editorial eye. So I'm really claiming and owning that satisfaction. And that's really something I want for people when you do get across the finish line. You really own something that no matter what happens in the world, you own something inside yourself that can never be taken away and can only contribute to more projects and more glory in your regular life. So I'm pretty pleased about that. I want that for everybody.
It is a wonderful thing to prove to yourself that you can do it and that you have done it, and that not just that you survived, but that you accomplished something that you're proud and pleased about.
Yeah, because imagine if I had given up and then I would have the rest of my life to feel bad about that and myself. And I just wasn't willing to I was much more willing to suck it up and do the work than to live with that kind of burden. Just couldn't do it.
Well, and I also see, in the end stages, which were often the hardest, from what you've just said, when you've got the critical eye and you've had some rejections and you're trying so hard to make it get over the last hump and actually get it out there in the world. I saw you doing things to make it more enjoyable for yourself, to make it, instead of a frantic frenzy, to make it something you could enjoy along the way. because a lot of writers just go nuts at the launch. It's so stressful. They get overwhelmed, and it takes away the satisfaction that you're talking about. It takes away that moment of basking and enjoying the rewards.
Yeah, I tried to set it up so that I was not doing that. There were a lot of different things that I could do that other people are doing, like an online launch party. I was like, oh gosh, no, that just does not sound fun. And I was really looking for delight for my readers, and what could I do that would delight them, and realizing that I had to be delighted as well.
Yes.
That is kind of a two-way conversation. I can't just make something because it's going to please other people. So I tried to set up the launch so that I sold that limited edition and then ended that on the launch date. And then the launch date, I had my launch party here in Denver, and that was just, it really was perfect. Everything was perfect. I was really pleased with that. So
I have to just show people. So I got the limited edition, and it came in this cute brown paper wrapping with twine around it, and it had, you guys probably can't see that, but it has, typewritten letter about it, and Sylvia Beach had a lending library. So in the back of this book, there is a little card that is like the lending library card, and there's this wonderful bit of coolness that Cynthia put in there that has little hints and things about the story, and very much the personal touch. So one of the things I loved about the salon, the online salon, and about the limited editions was, again, seeing how you, Cynthia, put your joy and your other aspects of creativity into this in order to connect and start conversations with readers in ways beyond just what was printed and produced in the printing process of the book. And it was really a much bigger invitation to connect and be part of the conversation around that. And that was charming and delightful. So when you say you realized you had to find something that delighted you in order to delight readers, I absolutely saw that in the book, and it's been really fun. It's been fun to watch that. And I can't imagine how much more energizing that was than trudging through the checklist of things you're supposed to do for launch.
Oh, it saved my life, because for the launch, to sell those limited editions, and then the launch, I got a name for that whole process. It's a million little clicks. It's like at the computer clicking away at everything, and so much work at the computer that it was such a relief that my part of the work was to go and rip paper and stamp things and fold things, and just the very tactile nature of it really saved me and helped me feel a little bit more pleasure at the process and not just computer stress.
And maybe even a little basking. Very, very fun stuff.
Well, it was cute. It was fun. It was, it's also meaningful. Like, I'm glad you mentioned Sylvia's lending library. It's meaningful to the book and to the story. So, I think that is important, that it's something that's relevant, to the book.
Yeah, it wasn't a gimmick. Yeah.
No, and I there's a border. There's a very fine line to gimmick, or what's the word? I forget the word I use. But it's like, how do I make a big splash? How do I get this out there? How do I differentiate? And if you're coming kind of from that high cotton candy place, it might just be some gimmick that's replicated from what somebody else did. But if you're like, what's going to delight me and my readers? What would Sylvia like? Then it's a whole other thing.
Well, and the point is engagement, right? The point is not just for that reader to enjoy it and come back and have a conversation with you, but also as a writer who's also in business, is to have that person talk with other people and say, hey, look at this cool thing. Can you believe this? Have you ever seen anything like this? Yeah, most of us don't do that when we get a new book from Amazon. There's nothing, it looks like all the other books. The purchase process was just like all the other books. There's something really special and delightful about that. And so I thought in terms of marketing, that was genius.
Thanks.
Yeah. Clever girl. So Cynthia.
I have a lot of help.
Oh, how could you not? Yeah, how could you not? So from the beginning, we've talked about sort of how the project felt at different stages. how has your understanding of what is a big life, how has that changed? So A, what do you think it is? And B, in the process of writing and learning all that you have about yourself and going through the challenges and the joys of it, did that change for you? This is actually dealt with in the book some. This is part of what Lily explicitly is learning is what kind of life does she want. So I wonder...
Do you want me to read? I have 2 paragraphs I could read from the book about this issue, and then I can talk about it.
Great.
This is at the beginning of chapter 33, which is at the end of the book. But I won't, there are no spoilers in it, I don't think. Lily made her way through Paris as if in a dream, passing people on their way home to ordinary lives and staid relationships. Home to their spouses, their children, their normal French existence. For once, Lily felt special, like an insider to something important. Hurrying to Paul's, Lily thought about what Louise had said. A small life? Did she choose a small life? Sylvia had a big life, a big circle of friends, a wide sphere of influence. The work she did was important. Her mother, if Lily admitted it, had a small life. She was ensconced in the tight circle of her house, garden, and family, her influence small compared to Sylvia's. Lily felt a twinge of shame, then more shame for betraying her mother with that thought. Her mother had sacrificed her career for Lily. Walking past the Sorbonne and all of her old haunts, Lily let that worry slip away. Her mother didn't care about things like big or small lives. She cared about her garden, her home, and her family. Lily felt lighter. So I think it's like the thought of a big life has always been appealing to me and important to me. But I think the way you measure that is the thing that is different. Mm-hmm. So as I was thinking about this question, I was like, well, it's kind of like what you do indicates a big life, but really more how you think about things is an indicator of a big life. Like being appreciative of what's around you, being satisfied with the immediacy and the intimacy of your daily life and the people that you encounter. That's no smaller than somebody who's out climbing Mount Everest or launching ships or whatever. It's really, it all adds up. I think the biggest life is the one that we feel our strength, that we feel challenged, that we feel growing. I mean, that's my thing. Like, this book has grown me. My work has grown me. My life is about living on a growth edge. If I'm not growing or being challenged, I'm not sure what I would do. So I feel like for things that we said in terms of my sense, my strength and my capacity and my perseverance, I feel like this book has grown me bigger. But it's also, as I've matured, like how I express a bigger life is changing. And I think I think having a dynamic definition of that is probably a really good idea for us. Like, this is what big is for me today. This is what big is for me this month. And big might be lying down in the hammock in the backyard with a book. So I think big is less about size and more about appreciation and energy that we give and receive.
Yeah, there's a lot of, I always think of it in terms of meaning and satisfaction and joy.
Yes,
but
exactly.
Yeah, that different days, different people find it in different ways, and that's a good thing. Yeah.
Yeah, because we learn from other people, like, oh, I can have that, I can have that, oh, sure, I'll go for that too, or something like that, my version of that. So the idea of the influences, like, if you're comparing and it's making you feel bad, then it's not a big life. Yeah. That's your critic making you feel small.
Well, Cynthia, it's been a joy to talk with you about your wonderful book and the exciting, from the outside looking in, the exciting work you've done to get there. And I can't wait to see the rest of the launch and what you end up doing next. You'll have to come back and tell us about that too.
All right. Thanks, Shelley.
Thanks, Cynthia.